Well, now to a subject that few of us really like to talk about, even though we know how important it is. I'm talking about what happens to your money and assets after you've gone.
Well, it's a sort of business that really calls for the help and expertise of people in the know, and for the families in this next film. That came in the shape of advice for financial peace of mind. They should consider setting up what's known as a family trust.
But fast forward a decade or more, and that advice is now haunting the families, leaving many facing thousands of pounds of costs that they never expected.
I've had hens since I was a boy at school. This is one of the greenhouses where we fetch all the plants up from seed. It's one of the most peacefulest places on this earth for me.
Ken Gemmer from Tyne and Wear enjoys much of his retirement spent on the allotment, a far cry from his working life.
I worked in the construction industry, oil and gas. And when I was working and living abroad, it was a 7-day week, 12 hours a day, for up to 6 to 8 weeks at a time.
In 2008, a few years after he'd retired, Ken looked to get his estate in order to try and make life as easy as possible for his 3 children after he died.
I missed so much in life when I was working away. I couldn't give them the time, and I feel I owe them at least that, to give them everything that I'm going to leave them.
Ken already had investments with Newcastle Building Society, so approached his contact there.
He knew my children. He knew my family's circumstances. I believed in him and I trusted him.
Ken was introduced to the Will Writing Company, formerly based in Nottinghamshire, and not to be confused with any other companies of a similar name. This company suggested that Ken could set up what's known as a family protection trust, an arrangement that's designed to make it easier for your assets, like your home or investments, to be protected and controlled by your loved ones after you die. But when Ken received the paperwork shortly afterwards, he was confused.
My daughter, Jacqueline, was named on the trust. My other 2 children weren't. I see 2 names who I didn't recognise at all. A person called Andrew Robertson, a solicitor, and Cynthia Duff, a solicitor for a company called McClure's Solicitors.
Ken says he got in touch with the Will Writing Company, which he says told him it was normal practice to have a solicitor named on a family trust. But years later, the names Andrew Robertson and Cynthia Duff would come back to haunt him. In 2019, when Ken decided he wanted to buy the freehold of his home, he learned the 2 solicitors had legal control over what happened to his house.
My head was in turmoil. Worked all my life with children, what I was going to leave them. Then I find out that these 2 people have got a major say in what happens to my property.
Ken contacted McClure's solicitors and asked for the 2 names to be removed from the trust, and the law firm duly obliged.
And I thought everything was settled.
But in 2022, Ken decided to sell his home and discovered that even though their names were no longer on the trust, they were on the deeds for his home, and he couldn't sell it without formally removing them.
I lost the sale of my house because of the names on the title deeds. My house was sold and I had to take it off the market again. I was distraught. Sleepless nights going through this paperwork and keep thinking, have I done something wrong?
Ken's problems had only just begun. When he tried to contact McClure's to amend the deeds, he learned the firm had gone bust. In desperation, Ken looked for help online.
I joined a group, Victims of McClure Solicitors. There's at least 3,000 members in this group. The more I found out about it, just made me very, very scared and worried about the future of my trust.
What Ken found was a litany of unhappy customers. Some said they'd spent thousands on setting up trusts, only to find errors that meant they needed to be completely redrafted. While others, like Annette Riding, who's also from Newcastle and whose parents both took out trusts with McClure's, only found out its solicitors were named on her parents' trust documents after her father had died and her mother was in a care home. Like Ken, her parents were introduced to the will writing company through Newcastle Building Society.
With my parents, they were of an age where you trusted the people who used to sign your passport. So the doctor, the bank manager, solicitor, they were held in high esteem. So when Mum and Dad walked into the building society, these were people that you trusted.
But the same McClure solicitors were named on the deeds of her parents' house, and trying to get them removed took more than 2 years.
We just had to pay the bills on the house whilst it was empty, couldn't rent it, couldn't sell it, couldn't sleep at nights. Just didn't know what to do. And of course, the type of person I am, the first person I would normally go and talk to things like this about was my mum. And obviously I couldn't talk to my mum about it because, one, she was in a nursing home, and if I'd told her about what was going on with the house...
Finished her off.
Annette and Ken were both forced to put the house sales on hold and employ their own solicitors, but they were eventually able to amend the deeds for good. However, for Ken, the stress of questioning whether he'd done the right thing for his family has really taken its toll.
It's cost us a lot of money, a lot of stress, a lot of heartache. After a long journey, I feel pretty good about what I've achieved in the 3 or 4 years I've been battling, but I'm not at peace with it yet. I need to chase this through right to the bitter end.
Well, to delve into this a bit more, I'm now joined by solicitor Gary Rycroft and our producer Katie Saatchi. First of all, Gary, can you just summarise what exactly are family protection trusts?
Yes, so a so-called family protection trust is a way of taking an asset, often the family home, and moving it from the ownership of an individual to the ownership of trustees who look after it. Now, one of the reasons for doing this, which was given to some of the people in this film, is that it can avoid the need for probate when someone dies connected with the family home. But I've got to say, it's a very complicated area of law, and it's certainly not what I would call a kind of off-the-shelf product. It's something that needs a great deal of thought in order to find out whether it really does suit your particular circumstances. And I don't think that happened here.
And is it normal practice for firms to put the names of its solicitors on the various trusts and on the deeds? And why on earth would they do that?
Well, look, in my humble opinion, solicitors should be trustees of a last resort, because there are circumstances where you don't have family members who can fulfill the role, but it should be the exception rather than the rule. And if solicitors are going to be appointed, it should be fully explained to the clients of the law firm what that means in practice, what the charges are going to be, and what the potential complications are if that individual solicitor goes rogue for whatever reason.
Well, Katie, I know you and the team have been looking into the companies that are involved in these family protection trusts and how they're sold. Can you tell us how it works?
Well, we know that lots of building societies and other financial institutions were paid a fee for referring their customers to the will writing company, which in many cases was the firm that set up the trusts with McClure. Looking into some of the firms involved, I noticed that when the will writing company went into administration in 2018, its assets were bought by Phillips Trust Corporation, a company that also later went into administration, and one that sadly we are very familiar with here on Rip Off Britain. And we know that the Serious Fraud Office has been investigating potential wrongdoing at Phillips Trust.
And I mean, Katie, Ken's not the only person in this situation, is he?
He's not. Tens of thousands of clients have been impacted by McClure's collapse. This has been really stressful for families, particularly those who only learned that a solicitor's name was on the deeds after the death of their loved one. We also know that some of these trusts were sold to customers as a way of ring-fencing care home fees, and that's led to some councils calling the trusts a sham and trying to claim tens of thousands in care home fees back from families.
And when a solicitor's firm goes bust, what does happen to the clients?
So, if you are a client of a regulated provider of legal services, regulation means two things. It means that there is compulsory insurance, so there's an insurance policy in place in case things go wrong, and it also means that there is a defined complaints process. So ultimately, if you're not happy with what's happened, in England and Wales, you can go to the Legal Ombudsman Service, and in Scotland, it's the Scottish Legal Complaint commissions. Now, I know that in the case of McClure, both those organisations have said that the possible route for customers to take is to look at the insurance policy that McClure's had in place. And I think if there is going to be a resolution of this, it's probably going to be via the insurance policy.
And where are McClure solicitors now? What's happened to them?
Well, the Solicitors Regulation Authority, which is the regulator for law firms in England and Wales, has investigated the issues relating to McClure. But given that the former partners of the firm have all taken themselves off the Solicitors Register, the regulator is unable to take any enforcement action.
Well, do you know what? I'm sure that anyone watching this now with a family trust is going to be searching around looking for their paperwork. What should they be looking for?
Well, find that paperwork and find out who are named as the trustees. Also, investigate who are the owners of your home. You can look at the land registry, get your land registry entries and just check who are the registered proprietors. Now, we've been talking about the Legal Ombudsman Service in England and Wales and the Scottish Legal Complaint Commission in Scotland. If you weren't told about costs associated with having a solicitor trustee, then the ultimate destination is to go to those services and complain about that. And in my view, that means that you shouldn't have to pay if you are faced with costs for having a solicitor removed as a trustee.
Katie and Gary, thank you both very much for your investigations and your advice. When we spoke to the Newcastle Building Society, it told us it had an introducer relationship with the will writing company for customers interested in estate planning services, also stressing that the will writing company and McClure solicitors were both responsible for the advice they gave to customers. We also contacted Andrew Robertson, one of the solicitors named in the trust and the former managing director of McClure Solicitors. He responded on behalf of the firm and fellow director Cynthia Duff, and he told us that very strict rules of client confidentiality prevent him from discussing individual cases, but stressed that clients were not misled and should not fear that money had been wasted, adding that the fact McClure no longer exists does not affect the legal validity of the trust. Robertson went on to say that McClure solicitors prepared the legal documentation and did not provide legal advice, which came from the will writing company. He stressed that trusts were never set up to avoid or mitigate inheritance tax, and that solicitors were only appointed as trustees and not as individuals, which means that properties were never owned by them. He told us that the choice of trustees was always up to the client, and solicitors would never have been appointed trustees without the client's consent. He maintained that it was sound legal advice for solicitors to be named as co-trustees, and stressed that while it was McClure's responsibility to advise clients, it was left to them to decide if they wished to have a trust.